must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
It is ridiculous and it is against the laws of nature that we can have somebody sitting pretty who takes home more money than the credible entrepreneur who is doing actual production of goods and services.
We always say it as it is.
It is only in this country that when a thief is arrested, you hear elders from their tribe saying, "He is our son and he is our thief."
If you are deviant and I call you leader,
Yes.
probably you are already a leader, but you are leading in the wrong direction.
We want to see the role of the youth
Yeah.
in the security,
Yes.
governance,
Yes.
and development.
The youth that I meet and work with here, you know, we call them the millennials and X's and Y's, this and that. They don't necessarily want to live like their fathers and grandfathers,
Yes.
do business like their fathers and grandfathers. They're more independent, they're better educated, and they're the ones that are making everything move in this region.
We look at the issues, we talk about issues that impact people's lives in Africa.
The African peoples themselves continue to cheer bad leaders, and because they cheer them on, they continue to be misled.
Let me ask you, doctor, would you rather be somebody who does not enjoy so much freedom but you are rich?
Yes.
Or you'd rather be poor who you are actually imprisoned by the poverty itself?
My goal is not to come here and say, I want the majority ownership, I want to own this, I want to own that, I want to do this. My goal is we all make money and we're all happy, and I help build a big business here.
Punchline is for Africa, with Africa, from Africa.
Several African leaders are on their way to Japan for TICAD conference that takes place or is taking place in Japan this week. This was a conference that was initiated by Japan in 1993 and it continues to rotate between Japan and Africa, which is co-ventured by the United Nations, World Bank, and other international UNDP bodies of the world. But the most important thing that comes out as African leaders jet into Japan is, do we benefit much from these conferences? How many people in Africa do benefit from these conferences? One strand of the reasoning of the School of Thought of Africa, Africa School of Thought, is the conferences are very good area of discussion, of reviewing and fatigue evaluation of what projects have been done and what projects need to be done. But the question remains, do we really tangibly see the fruits coming out to the ordinary citizens of Africa? This last night, I had a tweet with Madame Byanyima, who is the executive director of Oxfam. She sent out a tweet to say, can friends write how many sins, 7 sins that the G7 have committed to bring about the hardships in the world? Believe me or not, in that conference there was a Ramaphosa in Paris, and a Ramaphosa was not recognized until it has made news internationally about Ramaphosa's recognition and being called an identified person. Does Africa learn from these hiccups, mishaps that occur in these conferences? That is one strand. The second strand are countries that are inviting us to go to their places. Are they inviting us because of the rivalry between the superpowers themselves? I've only seen almost all the superpowers have been inviting people for the French conference, American conference, Africa conference, China Africa conference, Russia Africa conference, now Japan Africa conference. To these conferences come in good heart. We have seen conferences being duplicated. Qatar Africa conference, Saudi Arabia Africa conference, UAE Africa conference. These conferences must teach us something. And the something that we must be taught is Africa must begin to hold and host AU, Africa Summit Conference, where the big leaders can come and view and see what can be done on the continent. It will help us, it will make us very valuable, expressing our values, putting forward our values, what Africa stands for. As much as I encourage the discussions, and hopefully African leaders will learn from what experiences that Japan has gone through from the Second World War, being bombed upside down to a superpower in the world in terms of trade, in terms of economy, in terms of defense security. I believe Africa can do the same. And I believe one day we shall have the Africa Summit calling all the superpowers, including the heads of states of those countries in the world, to come to our African continent. Thank you.
In the fight against corruption, it has been demonstrated throughout the world that unless you sustain the war, and it is a war, remember that there are individuals, not only in Nigeria, but throughout the world, who suckle from the breasts of corruption. And they are not just about to win themselves off the suckling. They must be forced out of it, and they'll fight back. Because there are individuals, even in government, in all sectors of government, who now take their children to school on the basis of money corruptly acquired. They live in houses that are corruptly acquired. They do everything on the basis of things that are acquired through corruption. So when you want to stop it, they are going to kill you. They are going to ensure that you are neutralized. These are the people that you are fighting against, because these are individuals whose conscience is dead. And they are going to do anything on earth to prevent you. In fact, when one chooses to fight corruption, one must remember that he or she can't be eliminated at all times. And what President Buhari, and indeed any other president in the world, must do is to recruit the population. If the population has been wedded to the idea that corruption is a bad thing, then that is the beginning of the success of that battle. When I see, for example, your former Minister for Petroleum being investigated in the United Kingdom without being a sadist, I'm very happy. Because if you look at the wealth that he is alleged to have accumulated, that is unexplained wealth. Even if she lived for 1,000 years, she would never make that kind of money. James Seabury, who was prosecuted, convicted, and served sentence in the United Kingdom. What lacks in Africa is punishment. Impunity is alive and well in Africa. And we, the electorate, as I say times without number, are in the business of celebrating thieves. We must stop. Yesterday, Barrister Farana said it very well, that we camouflage theft by giving them nice English names: money laundering, fraud, embezzlement, and all those veneers that make them look as if it is some kind of nice game. Let us call these men and women by the right name. They are thieves, stealing on an industrial scale. They are murderers. And once we begin to call them like that, and they have a mark of Cain upon their forehead, and we shun them. Has it been done in African countries? Yes, it has been done. And I keep on repeating, in countries such as Tanzania, they are being dealt with. In Rwanda, they are being dealt with. In Mauritius, they are being dealt with. In Botswana, they are being dealt with. Once you begin to deal with them, then the others who may want to behave like them will begin to take the cue. We must, in the nature of things, earn what we earn through the sweat of our brow. That is the only way in which Africa will realize their potential. Many of these individuals who are in positions of leadership in Africa don't want to leave because they are thieves. And they are scared. They are scared that if they left office, they would be prosecuted. And my view is that they should be prosecuted. You know, individuals such as Hissène Habré, who we know what he did, was it in Chad, are a good example to the leadership that impunity will not thrive. Because I've been talking to a friend of mine from the Cameroons who tells me what is happening in their country right now. And other African countries are blind to it. It doesn't even occupy the headlines of the neighboring newspapers of the country's neighbors' newspapers. Yet the Cameroons now should be in the same position as we see the conflict in Catalan in Spain. Yet we are attacking it in page 13 in newspapers in Nigeria, in Liberia, and other countries. The time has come that Africa must learn and realize that the world is not bothered about Africa. The world is only bothered about Africa when they want to take the resources of Africa. Then they bother. They want oil, they bother. And I'm using the word bother in a very deliberate fashion, not in the traditional orthodox fashion. They bother when they want to take our timber. They bother when they want to take our bauxite, when they want to take our coke, when they want to take our uranium. But they don't bother about us. They come to our continent without disrespecting the elephant, and they want to preserve the elephant so that they can come and watch the elephant, but they don't care if 100 Africans die. They want to preserve our monkeys. They want to preserve our leopards and our other animals, but they don't care about us. To them, Africa is a zoo of sorts. And until the day that we Africans realize that we are on our own, we are going nowhere. And very soon they are going to shut us out, if they have not shut us out already. We'll not go to the United States of America, we'll not go to Europe, and I'm happy that we are being forced to stay in Africa. Let us stay in Africa and build Africa. I mean, what does Africa lack in terms of resources? What do we lack? If it is solar energy, which continent is capable of producing solar energy to light this continent and the entire earth? If it is hydroelectricity, what can we not generate? If it is minerals, if we wanted to make bombs, if we should, where do they get their uranium from? If it is timber, what don't we have? If it is human resources, we are 2 billion of us, and we are people who have intelligence. And yet we are kept in a constant state of conflict. The Europeans, the French persuading their former colonies that they are more French than they are Yoruba. They are more French than they are Wolofs and Mandinkas. The British persuading us that we are more British than we are Ibibio or Yoruba. And of course, when we find ourselves in that schizophrenic state, then we engage in internal conflict and they sell their arms to us. Tell me, which African country makes guns? None. I think Africans must recognize that bad governance is harmful to their very well-being, not only for the current generation, but generations yet to be born. This is a continent that has always had potential. These are a people that have always had potential. But since we regained our independence from the colonialists, African leaders in many countries have consistently demonstrated that they are not working in the interest of their people. And that is sad, because many of the individuals who occupied positions of leadership are still beholden to the colonial masters. We see former French colonized nations, leaders who are beholden to Paris, those who are colonized by Portugal, beholden to Lisbon, those who are colonized by Belgium, beholden to Brussels, those colonized by the United Kingdom, beholden to London, and the single country that was colonized by Spain, Equatorial Guinea, beholden to Madrid. And this is tragic. Of course, currently, many African leaders are getting beholden to Beijing, and progressively the United States of America in Washington. The net effect is that the African agenda is being sacrificed to the detriment of the peoples. And we have examples which are live as I speak. The problems in the Cameroon, the problems in Togo, the problems in South Sudan, the problem in Central African Republic, in Mali, in Mauritania. And these are sad things. And the tragic thing is that the African Union appears to be helpless in this situation.
Very happy that you had time to join us today. It is the second day of September 2019. The show is Good Morning Africa, and my name is Miriam Gutu, coming to you all the way from Kenya, wherever you're watching us from. Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, that was Professor Pielo Lumumba, always giving very, thought-provoking lectures about Africa and the happenings across this continent. Of course, I have the latest being on Monday. A lot happened from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday across Africa, so I'll be bringing you up to date with the latest news from across the continent. But first, I would like for us to just go through some of the news-making headlines here in Kenya, and then I'll jump in to the news-making headlines across Africa, and I'll just look at a quick perusing through the dailies here in Kenya, and we start with the Standard. And the headline reads, Uhuru in new airport drama over Ruto ally. Maybe I'll just go to page 5 and see what we can get from that. Apparently, let's just get the details from the Standard newspaper on page 5. And the Standard says, airport drama as Uhuru's men order pictures to be deleted. So apparently, presidential guards ordered a section of official photographers to delete pictures capturing President Uhuru Kenyatta's reception on his arrival at the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. And President Kenyatta, who landed shortly after 9 a.m. Last Thursday from Japan, was received by Deputy President William Ruto, Chief of Defense Forces General Samson Mwatete, Military Service Commanders, Inspector General of Police Hilary Motiambai, and Nandi Governor Stephen Sang, among others. So I think that from what I read from this story, or maybe let me just continue reading so that it's not my wordings on the Standard, and it says, as in tradition, photographers from both the presidentials and the DP's pool clicked away as he exchanged pleasantries with top officials. And after that, after greeting Mr. Sang, who was the last in line, he headed straight to the presidential limousine to leave for State House. However, according to an official who was present, the vehicle stopped briefly and Uhuru's aide-de-camp alighted and talked to presidential escort unit commander Josephat Kirimi, and Mr. Kirimi then issued instructions to his men, who singled out a few photographers and ordered them to delete the photos they had taken of the president's arrival, and they were given a stern warning that should any picture leak, they will be held personally liable, their source has confirmed. Now, The other photographers present, however, delivered the photos they took as per protocol. It is not clear what got the president to ask his security men to order the deletion of the pictures. The source, however, intimated that Sang's arrival may have caught some of the leaders present off guard. So, in case you're wondering, that is according to that source that was present in that when President Uhuru Kenyatta was arriving from the TCAD convention in Japan. And so, apparently, Mr. Sang, the governor for Nandi, was at the airport to receive the president, among other protocols that were present that received the president from the overseas visit. The convention in Tokyo. So, Mr. Sang has been in the middle of a scandal. I think right now he still has a case in court. Remember when he went destroying the properties at Mao? Remember the tea farm that he went destroying in his county somewhere in Nandi? And so he still has a case in court, and it has been alluded that the president is keen not to be seen around with people who have graft or scandal cases to answer in the courts, and so he does not want to be seen as though he's warming up to these people. So he's been trying to distance himself with such individuals. So the presence of Mr. Sang really caught him off guard. He did not expect. And then you're thinking, this is the governor for Nandi. I mean, why is he all the way over there? If it was the governor for Nairobi, the JKI is in Nairobi, then that perhaps would make sense. But even that still, why would he be part of the protocol to receive the president? And so that when the president, he was the last in line. So after the president, greeted him, he went straight to his presidential limousine and he left the airport. And then after that, of course, the protocol had to apparently have some photos deleted that might have shown him and maybe Sang greeting, I don't know. So that is what the Standard is saying. The story is on page 5 of the Standard newspaper this morning. So it is said that Sang had driven to Ruto's residence on Thursday morning and accompanied the DP to JKA to welcome the president. The incident is said to have surprised the governor, who reportedly told his friends he could not believe that what he had witnessed, and the president is said to have instructed his handlers to closely control publicity surrounding his activities, including his departures and arrivals. He has told his handlers his movement are not supposed to be out there unless he authorizes the same. Whatever happened, there was expected because of some of us, we had not expected the picture session. So another source had said that is someone who was apparently present at that on the Thursday's event. So last Tuesday, State House spokesperson Kanzidena sent a statement to Newsroom saying that the president had left the country the previous night for Japan to attend the 7th Tokyo International Conference on Africa Development in, of course, Yokohama, Japan. But on Thursday, State House curiously did not send a statement or pictures announcing Uhuru's return from the 3-day event. So it was expected, from the Presidential Press Service, and of course through the press, a person there for the State House, Kanzidena. She, the State House spokesperson Kanzidena there, she's the one responsible, to sending out such communicate from the State House. What is happening? What the State House feels is important to get to the public. So apparently, she said the president had left for the TCAD conference in Japan, but they went radio silent on the president's arrival back from Japan. And this is not the first time that we've had such cases happening at the JKA. Remember the other purported meeting that happened at the JKA, where apparently Kiambu Governor Mr. Waititu had gone there together also with the deputy president to receive the president. I don't know where he was. I can't remember exactly where he was coming from, which country, but it appears it was the same story as this one. And of course, they both came out to refute it. The office of the deputy president came out to refute those claims that he was not present at JKIA, and he was at another rally somewhere at the Rift Valley. So, now you hear about this. So you wonder, was there some truth to that alleged, meeting that had happened at JKI, that the president snapped Kiambu Governor Mr. Waititu, or was there some truth to that or not? But of course the DP's office came out to refute it, because he was mentioned to have been the person who came with Mr. Waititu. And also, Mr. Waititu is engulfed in some scandal right now. He has a case ongoing on the misappropriation and loss of 588 million Kenya shillings of Kiambu County, and so he's in charge, and he's answering questions to that. So even at that time is when the ESCC officers had raided Mr. Waititu at his home and his office, and so the case had just started. So the president was not keen to be seen with him, and so, but they came out and they refuted the claims but now you read this and you wonder, okay, so now what is really happening? But the president has made it very clear on his war and fight against corruption, and he seems as though his efforts are being curtailed by people who are with him, one, in the same party, and two, in his government, and three, from his backyard. So they have been curtailing, or when you read the news and you see what has been happening, it appears as though people who are perceived to be very close allies with the president are the people who, one, have been mentioned very, in his party, have been mentioned extensively. The ministers he appointed to these positions have been mentioned extensively in corruption. The people officials from the Jubilee Party and others who are allied to a fraction of the Jubilee leadership. So it has been a lot, and that the president has made it very clear that his war on corruption will not be stopped, and nothing will slow down his ambition to achieve the agenda that he has for Kenyans. And that has not been received very well from the other side of the ally, who feel as though the president have neglected especially his stronghold and his allies, and now he's trying to reach out to the other side, especially after the famous handshake with the NASA leader Raila Odinga. It was not well received by a fraction of politicians in this country, and so since then it has been a matter of back and forth, especially in the Jubilee leadership. So this story just broke out. So let's see by the end of the day or tomorrow how much it would have developed. Will somebody come out and refute these claims? Will Sang come out and refute these claims? But as we have read here through undisclosed sources, Mr. Sang is said to have been shocked by what he witnessed on Thursday when he was there as part of the dignitaries to receive President Uhuru Kenyatta, who was coming from the TCAD conference in Japan. So this is a story that I know today Kenyans will be running with it, and I can't wait to go to social media and just see the Kenyans and their thoughts and what they have to say about this story. And maybe we'll have an official communication from perhaps Nandi, Governor, Mr. Sang, or even State House, just to clarify matter. And if they both go silent, and then that will be left for us to imagine, for our own imagination and our own conclusions. So that is what is said to have happened on a Thursday after the GKIA, and that is according to the Standard. So on the same page here, there is Governor Jackson Mandago wants the government and the Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, to seek alternative ways of dealing with local investors accused of tax evasion instead of prosecuting them. The Uasin Gishu County boss criticized the manner in which the government was handling local companies accused of failing to pay taxes, terming the move counterproductive. Now, I'll just quote what he said here, and he said, the government and KRA should initiate amicable ways on how local companies with outstanding taxes running into billions of shillings should meet their tax obligations instead of closing down businesses, as the move would hurt employment opportunities for Kenyans, said Mandago. You know what? I might not agree with a lot of things Mr. Mandago says, but on this one, I think he has a lot of point, and I would see where he's coming from. I remember this comes from a backdrop. Remember about over a week ago, Kiroche's CEO, together with her husband, they were arrested over tax evasion. And you wonder, because that went into tunes of billions. Even that guy, what was his name? This other brewery somewhere in Ruiru or Chuja, I'm not sure. But he owed the government around 41 billion, is it? And you wonder, how long did the KRA realize that this person has not been paying tax and to let it accumulate to that huge amount? I mean, what is really not happening with the KRA, or what is the problem behind it, or what is the story behind it, or what is the motivating factor behind it? So now Mandago here is suggesting instead of just the government officials, especially together with the KRA, just going at these local investors, and in the manner in which it was handled, especially for Tabitha the other time, it was not very encouraging, and that might scare investors, even even foreign investors who might want to come in and invest in this country. So perhaps before the KRA should not let such companies, because these are some of the leading companies in Kenya. So maybe they should closely monitor, such companies, and make sure they keep in touch and update them every often, and check, their record when it comes to tax compliance, and not for them to wait until the amount has accumulated to billions of Kenya shillings, and that's when they go after them. Remember, these people are providing, employment for a lot of Kenyans. These people have created, have taken our youths off the streets. And, they're just trying to work on and contribute to the Kenyan economy. Especially, say, a person like the CEO of Keroche Breweries. So, I don't know, perhaps there could be a better way in which the KRA would handle such matters, and that is what Uasin Gishu County boss is saying, and is criticizing the manner in which, the government, and especially the taxman, goes after such individuals, and is terming it very counterproductive. And, on that, I think I would, to some extent, agree with Governor Jackson Mandago, of Uasin Gishu County. So maybe KRA needs to change tack on how to handle such matters, and also not wait. I'm sure they have a data and they can see, there are not so many top companies, top earners in this country, but they can't be that much that you're unable to keep track record of how they're performing, how they're emitting, and all that, and you can always compare. You have the data with you, so don't wait until it's out of hand and now it's become a public spectacle. I think Kenyans have had enough of that. And on page 4 of the Standard, I can see here inside the 2-page will that led to a 23-year fight, and I'll just read a part of that. A will drafted by the late freedom fighter Fred Kubai has been upheld by a court. In it, he disowned his 4 wives, he disowned his wives, and left his property to a woman his family insists was their house help. For a second time, the family court in Nairobi has rejected claims by his children that the will had been forged by Christina Gakuhi, the woman they allege was their house help, and the 2-page handwritten document dated January 19th, 1991 has been the subject of a 23-year succession battle following Kubai's death on Madaraka Day in 1996. Now on the second page, written in capital letters, the will states that how he parted ways with his 4 wives, he would appear. This was emphasis as the first page is written in small case letters and makes Mr. Gakuhi the sole administrator of Kubai's estate. Now the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, investigated claims of forgery by the patriarch's children and concluded that the will was forgery. However, the court have twice rejected that finding. So this is what happens. That is the will of a former freedom fighter, Mr. Kubai, who died in 1996, and apparently he disowned all his 4 wives and left, the former, who the family refers to as the former house help, as the custodian of all his wealth. That is quite interesting. Like, what will lead a man to do that? So, of course, the family has contested this will that was written, and twice the court has rejected. And, of course, the DCI also, I see, has been mentioned and said that the will could be a forgery, but taking that evidence to court also The court have twice rejected the findings from the DCI, and so it appears that the court now has settled the matter and has upheld, the will by Mr. Fred Kubai, the former freedom fighter here in Kenya, who passed away in 1996, and that will has been a subject of contention for the last 23 years. So there we go. So the schools reopen today, and there's a showdown that is looming across the Mau and Rift Valley. Members of Parliament ask parents to send their children to 15 schools in Mau Forest despite government's directive on their closure. Let me just take a look at that. That should be in page 9 of the Standard, and then we'll quickly go to another newspaper here, and then we can go to what is making headlines across Africa. And let me just see that. Because the evictions at the Mau is actually what started as a problem between Raila Odinga and now the Deputy President William Ruto. Where is that story on page 9? All right, here it is. So it says Rift Valley leaders have asked parents to send their children to 15 schools shut in Mau, setting stage for confrontation with the government as schools reopen today for the third time. Last week, Rift Valley Regional Commissioner George Natembeya declared the schools were illegal as they were on forest land and asked families affected by second phase eviction to look for alternative schools for the children. Over 4,600 learners could be affected by the move. Speaking in Nairobi yesterday, Rift Valley members of Parliament told parents in the affected areas to ignore the government's directive and send their children to their respective schools. Now a showdown looms today because the government gave a directive, and now the members of Parliament from that affected area are just urging the parents to take the kids back to school. Schools in Kenya are opening today for the third term. It's starting today, and so the government had given a very strong directive last week and said the 15 schools that are in Mau Forest should not be reopened, and so now we see the members of Parliament from that region coming out and telling parents to go against the directive by the government. So we don't know how this will pan out. So now maybe I should just take us straight to what is making headlines in Africa, and then we will come back to the Kenyan news, and we will look at, of course, the legacy of Uhuru Kenyatta. We just mentioned a few there, and of course his full throttle war on corruption that of course has attracted some enemies within his circles, and not many people received that in kind, especially people who are perceived to be very close to him, as they see themselves as being the victims or the targets when it comes to the war against corruption. And the other topic about Kenya is corruption in judiciary. And when you see that, I see a headline here in the Daily Nation, and it says that Treasury slept as tax defaulters got away. And then just up there on the Daily Nation, it says Judiciary on the spot too for giving orders stopping KRA from demanding taxes. So we see how the laxity in the judiciary actually allows these defaulters or these people to get away because the court injunctions, the cases take too long, and it is said now judiciary is on the spot because it gives orders stopping the KRA. So now KRA, it has been blamed for not even meeting the target for tax collection, but it is saying that when it wants to go to some of these individuals, they go to court, and the court works against their efforts in trying to making sure that these tax defaulters actually pay or they face the law, as judiciary gives them orders to stop KRA officials from getting to them. So we'll just look at that and how the judiciary is contributing to this mess that is engulfing the Kenya Revenue Authority, the body that is mandated with collecting tax here in Kenya. So we look at that when we look at corruption in the judiciary, and of course the handshake, peace and unity. I think that is we cannot state it enough here that peace and stability in this country is very vital. So whatever form it comes, I think we people of goodwill and who mean well for this country should always support such efforts, and we can see that the coming together of course there are political undertones to that of President Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, has sort of brought some stability in this country, and it only was supposed to take these two leaders for the country to be where it is today. And we can say that so far, I think so good, depending on which side political divide you are allied to. So thank you so much. Mike Napo, you're saying hi, good morning, and good morning to you, Gasheru Karanja. You're saying good morning, and you're watching from Kirinyaga, Kenya. How is Kirinyaga this morning? Is it cold? The weather in Nairobi has been behaving very funny. Sometimes it decides it's warm, sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's cold. A bit confusing. Normally, years back in August will be a lot of sunshine. That would be summer for us. But as it appears, things have changed, and so it's a mixed bag of all that. Cold, sunny, rains, and all that. And thank you so much, Uzoma Ezebude. Chidi, you're saying good morning, Punchline Africa, and you're saying Biafra needs freedom. All right. And Mike Napo, are you? There's no problem, and you mean there's no problem in Nigeria? Well, I think you're referring to the clip that we played earlier before I came in, and that was Professor Pielo Lumumba giving a lecture somewhere about Africa, and I think he was talking about Nigeria. So, all right. But I still have some news from Nigeria, so I hope you keep it here. And let's just go straight. We start with Sudan. And consultations are continued on Sunday in Sudan to reach the information of the government. 4 days after the date initially planned for the announcement of this new cabinet, which should mark one of the main stages of the post-Bashir, transition. Inaugurated on 21st August, Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok was to announce the composition of his government on Wednesday, and this Sunday was to be the occasion for the first meeting with the Sovereign Council, a civilian majority body, but headed by a military officer who must supervise the transition. And still on Sudan, and a Sudanese court on Saturday charged the ousted President Omar al-Bashir on trial for corruption with illegal acquisition and for use of foreign funds. Judge Sadiq Abdurrahman said at the third session of Bashir's trial that foreign funds of multiple currencies were found at his home. Authorities had seized 6.9 million euros, that is equivalent to around 351 $770 US, or roughly 5.7 million Sudanese pounds at Bashir's home, which he acquired and used illegally. Asked about the source, Bashir, who is 75 years old, admitted to receiving funds from Saudi royals, and I'll just be giving you the details of that when we'll be looking at that in details. And we go to Nigeria, where Nigeria's anti-graft body Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, on Friday announced the arrest of a top internet fraudster wanted by United States Federal Bureau of Investigations, the FBI. Oyediran Joseph's arrest was disclosed by the EFCC's zonal head in the Central Kwara State Regional Capital, Ilorin. Sharu Isiaku confirmed the arrest was part of EFCC's partnership with the FBI. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has promised that peacekeepers would continue to support the Congolese army against the groups. Sunday, he arrived in Beni in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, victimized by the Ebola epidemic. The Beni region has also been the scene of massacre of hundreds of civilians since 2014, killings attributed by the authorities to the Ugandan militia of the Allied Democratic Forces. And now an update on the East African community, and civil society organizations and scholars has heaped blame on East Africa's political leaders for their failure to keep commitments they have made to the promotion of regional integration. They said the decisions the EAC's community heads of state make are anchored on a treaty in a process driven by the political leaders rather than the people. They cited the EAC's heads of state's decision to reconfigure the political federation pillar to confederation, a mode which they said lacked legal backing in the treaty establishing the bloc. And we go to Somalia, where the administration of the Somali region of Jubaland, which is one of the country's richest areas with the lucrative port of Kismayo as its capital, has condemned what it called the abduction of its security minister by the National Somali authorities. Police in the capital, Mogadishu, had confirmed that the minister, Abdi Rashid Janan, was arrested for what they described as serious crimes upon arrival at Mogadishu airport on Saturday. Correspondents say the UN-backed government is trying to exercise greater control for the regional states, and last month it refused to recognize the re-election of Ahmed Mohamed Islam, known by his nickname Madobe, to lead Jubaland. The dispute has been exacerbated in recent months as rival Gulf states and neighboring nations have also taken sides. We go to Mali, where 15 people were killed on Sunday when a 3-story building under construction collapsed like a house of cards in the Mali capital, Bamako. The government and local media has reported 26 people were rescued alive from the partially occupied building after it collapsed just before dawn. And we go to Tanzania, where lawyers of a prominent Tanzania investigative journalist called on Friday for urgent medical attention for their client after court adjourned his case for the third time since he was arraigned nearly a month ago. Eric Kabendera, who has written for national and international publications, including Britain's The Guardian, The East Africa, and The Times of London, was arrested at his home in Dar es Salaam on July 29th. Now, police said he was detained over issues concerning his citizenship, but on August 5th, he was charged with leading organized crime, failing to pay taxes, and money laundering. And we move to Zambia, where a leader of Zambia's opposition denied defamation charges in court on Friday after being arrested for a video in which he allegedly refers to President Edgar Lungu as a dog. Chishimba Kambwili, head of the National Democratic Congress, NDC, was arrested on Wednesday for diffusing a video in which he said some dogs from Chawama do not get tired of traveling. Chawama is a slum in Zambia's capital, Lusaka, where Lungu lived and served as member of parliament before taking over the presidency in 2015. We go to Botswana, where also it has its own wars, and Botswana's President Mokgweetsi Matisi has ordered general elections on October 23rd as tensions rise with his estranged predecessor Ian Khama, the man who put him in the top job. Khama, whose father led the Southern African country to independence, has accused Masisi of becoming an autocrat and threatening the country's reputation as a beacon of stability in a troubled continent. Masisi has called for the holding of the 2019 general elections to fill the 57 National Assembly vacancies and 490 local government vacancies, Osupile Maroba from the National Election Commission confirmed on Friday. And Africa's elephants caught from the wild will no longer be allowed to leave the continent except under special exemptions following the coming into effect earlier last week of a near total ban on trade in live African elephants. Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Botswana, all states that have in the recent past benefited from an existing trade, did not agree with the international law to earn millions of foreign currencies, protested the new resolution. The parties of the 18th Conference of the Parties COP of Cities, which closed Wednesday in Geneva, voted last Tuesday to finally end this trend that saw Africa's elephants shipped to zoos and circuses overseas. The meeting bids to reopen trade in ivory was also very much rejected. And in Cameroon, lawyers in Cameroon are set to go on a 5-day strike to protest against what they describe as difficulties endured by them in the exercise of their duties. The strike will run from the 16th to 20th September, and the lawyers said in a release signed by Bar Council President Chakonte Party and 12 others, the lawyers said they had consistently been denied access to their clients and persons in the various detention centers. The lawyers also cited several rights violations by judicial authorities as trialed in a language not understood by the accused, extraction of confessional statements from accused persons, and through the use of torture and inducements. The lawyers also say the action is induced by the illegal and prolonged detention of accused persons, amongst other issues they listed in that communique. So that is just the latest from across Africa. Of course, I still have more here, and of course Libya, I think 3 more, and the United Nations Security Council, Antonio Guterres, has said he fears Libya will end up in a full civil war unless moves are made soon to end the conflict. He acknowledged the need for the support of the international community in finding a political solution for the country. Guterres raised concerns over the presence of foreign fighters and mercenaries being employed by the parties to the conflict of Libya, as well as by the influx of weapons in the country, calling for strict adherence of an arms embargo in place since 2011. And of course, we end with South Sudan, where some members of the G10 and former army generals have joined the ranks to end the civil war by addressing the root causes of the conflict. The development was unveiled in the Kingdom of Netherlands on Friday. They included Oyai Deng Ajak, Pegan Amum Okiech, Chirino Hiteng Ofuho, Paul Malong Awan, and Thomas Cicero Swaka. All of the leaders declined to be part of the September 2018 revitalized peace agreement. They represent the South Sudan National Democratic Alliance, the Real Sudan's People's Liberation Movement, and the South Sudan United Front and Army. In a declaration of principles issued on Friday, they refer to themselves as the United South Sudan Opposition Movement. So that is the latest. Of course, from Africa this morning. Share with me anything that you feel we might need to know, and I did not include in today's bulletin. But let's just start with Libya, and then we can go and see what's happening there in Cameroon, especially touching on the Amazonians. We see there's a problem, and of course, the lawyers want to be on strike, and we see how that will affect, or what that means, or what has actually advised the need to go on strike between the 16th and the 20th of September. This month. But let's just start with Libya. Of course, now Guterres went to Libya, and he's saying now that he fears that Libya will end up in a full civil war. Isn't that country in a full civil war already? Or what really? To what level does it get? As it is right now. Even Libyans themselves, the citizens themselves, are armed. Remember, after the arming, when they were ousting the long-standing leader, Colonel Gaddafi, the arms found themselves in people who had not even had previous training on holding very serious weapons, And after Gaddafi was dead, nobody thought about coming back and getting these arms, and they were not accounted for. So basically in Libya, especially in capital cities like Tripoli or even Benghazi, or these are the places that really were, the part of, that agitation for reforms and for the ousting of Gaddafi. People are armed there. Like essentially in every household, you find a rifle or two, or, and very serious weapons there. So I believe that Libya is full on in civil war. If not, it's very close to the blink of it. And of course, Secretary General Antonio Guterres now says that the country he fears will end up in full civil war unless moves are soon made to end the conflict. Now, he acknowledged that the need for support of the international community in finding a political solution for the country would be very important. And a UN envoy to Libya, Ghassan Salame, also denounced external interference in an interview with the French newspaper Le Monde. This UN envoy to Libya came out on Friday and denounced that there are actually no external interference in the war that is happening today in Libya. Like anybody who has been following this news across the world, surely that is something that is simply not true, because we know there are external forces who are actually fueling the war that is now happening in Libya, who have interests in Libya itself. All right? So a GNA chief, Fayed al-Sarraj, who this is the person that is UN recognized leader in Libya, al-Sarraj is supported by Turkey and Qatar. And now, while Haftar that is the renegade Haftar, is backed by Egypt and the United Arab Emirates, and has also received political support from the United States, Russia, and France. Now, let's just underline United States, Russia, and France, and maybe this will explain why I'm even confused when it comes to what is happening in Libya, because Chief Fayed al-Sarraj is the UN-backed government. Like, he's the one who has the support from the United Nations. He's the one who is legally recognized as the leader or the president or the leader of Libya as it is right now, backed by the United Nations. On the other hand, of course, he has received support from a country like Turkey and Qatar. So that explains why Turkey and Qatar are not in the same page with the UAE and also Saudi Arabia, because they are perceived to be supporting Haftar. But now what is even more confusing to me is that General Haftar also allegedly has the backing of the United States, Russia, and France. And let me tell you why this is confusing to me. Because if you understand the composition of the United Nations Security Council, there are 5 permanent members who hold the veto power. If one member does not agree, it does not matter, even if the matter is of international interest, then that motion will not pass. Now, because we have 5 permanent, members, that is China, France, Russia, United Kingdom, and United States. And we've seen that United States, Russia, and France are also involved in this war, and they are supporting what will be perceived as the opposition of the UN-backed government. Now, the UN Security Council sits down, makes some resolutions, some policies, and whatever it is that they think should be done in terms of restoring Libya to where it was and bringing the two fractions together, or whatever it is that they're trying to do to make sure that Libya does not sink into further, political problems or further wars that has engulfed this country since 2011 after the killing and the ousting and then killing of former President Gaddafi. So they sit down and they talk about it, and they have all these conferences about Libya. And when they come out, 3 of the 5 members of the United Nations Security Council, permanent members, are there going against what it is that they have decided at the UN Security Council, And they are backing now the other person that is not recognized by the United Nations. I'm confused. I don't know who else is confused out there. So I don't understand. I don't understand how this works. I don't understand how this works, because it's very confusing. And any of the 5 permanent, of course, members have the power of veto, like I mentioned before, which enables them to prevent the adoption of any substantive draft council resolution, regardless of its level of international support. And we have seen France time and time again refusing, when a motion has been brought in the UN Security Council to maybe measures to be taken against Haftar. We've seen that. And so I don't know where this leaves let's say Libya in this case, because now if the United Nations Security Council, the permanent members, they have a very important role in how some of these policies are passed and some of these decisions are made on the international, field. So when they are the ones who are going against even the United Nations, policies and what they have agreed on. They have agreed on together. You wonder. So out of the 5, only 2 countries are not really involved in this war, and that will be the United Kingdom and maybe China. China, it's a lot of times hands-free unless they have something to. When it comes to Africa, they're just coming in the name of development and investments because, at the end of the day, it's working well for the economy and for their people. So unless they see such an opportunity, normally they like sitting on the fence and they don't like getting involved too much in countries' political, whatever it is that is happening. So it's only China and the UK that are seen to be, off right now, but United States, Russia, and France, especially France, has been mentioned, and very much, and I say to be part and parcel of what the problem today in Libya. So that is my contention. I don't understand how 3 members of the permanent member of the UN Security Council, actually out of the 5, are supporting Haftar, and yet there is Fayed Asaraj, who is of the leader of the GNA, who is recognized and backed by the United Nations. I do not understand how that matrix works out. Please help me understand this. It's quite oxymoronic. Justin Oko, Justice, you're saying good morning to you guys watching from Biafra land. I don't know what's happening in Biafra land this morning. Maybe afternoon now. It's top of the hour here in Kenya. So let me know how that is. What is happening there from Biafra? Is there any news from the weekend? I see here Justice Oko, you're saying that Ethiopia grants Sidama referendum. Okay. So the referendum will be dated, will happen on the 13th of November 2019. Oh, that's really nice. Remember, Ethiopia has already, I think, 5 autonomous regions there. So the Sidama region really was agitating to be allowed for a referendum to allow them to be also autonomous there in Ethiopia. But in Nigeria, referendum means a declaration of war. So you're saying Ethiopians, the Sidama region especially, has been allowed to have their, their referendum on November 13th. That is the date that has been, of course, scheduled. So I think this is breaking news because I did not see this when I was coming here. And you're wondering why, and for a long period of time, Biafrans have been agitating for a need to separate themselves from the larger Nigeria and have their own, state. And you wonder why this is taking too long. Well, yes, but I think you keep because I know the Sidama people have not been letting go. They have been agitating days after days. I come here and I read their news, and so finally, the government of Ethiopia, through the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, has apparently allowed the Sidama referendum to happen on the 13th November 2019. I don't know what all that will mean in the bigger scale. The leadership, what that says of the leadership of the new Prime Minister. Okay, not really new because now he's over a year in that office. Abiy Ahmed, who is perceived to be a bit liberal and more open-minded and more, I think, inclusive compared to the previous leaders there in Ethiopia. I don't know what that will mean when it comes to the political landscape in Ethiopia and indeed in this region as a whole and across Africa. Seeing like a place like Nigeria, like you've mentioned here, Justice Oko, you're saying you have been agitating for a secession. That has not been allowed. We have seen the Amazonians also. That is what they want. And some group also in Ghana, but I think that was thwarted by the authorities there in Ghana, so it did not go very far. But we see people like Biafra or Amazonians who, when you look at their agitation, is quite legit. Whatever the reasons why they really want to be separated, it's quite. You can look at it and it's quite legit. And like Biafra land, it was supposed to be a country as it is right now until it was messed. That was the agreement years ago. And over 50 years, after the Biafra War, they have been agitating to be allowed to have a self-rule, but that has not been made possible. So here, one of our viewers is asking, why is it? And the Sidama just started agitating the other day, but now they've been given a date by the government to hold, of course, the referendum and see if to vote if they want to have their own autonomy or to be part of, of course, autonomy within Ethiopia. So it's interesting. We'll see how that will pan out. And of course, we go to Sudan. Where over the week on Saturday, the ousted President Omar al-Bashir who is on trial for corruption with illegal acquisition and use of foreign funds, of course, admitted to that. And Judge Al-Sadiq Abdurrahman said at the third session of Bashir's trial that foreign funds of multiple currencies were found at his home, and they're saying it amounted to around 351,770,000 US dollars, or an equivalent of 5.7 million Sudanese pounds. This money was found in Bashir's home. But when I was reading that story from Al Jazeera this morning, he actually went ahead, the former President Omar al-Bashir went ahead and confessed that he received a phone call from Saudi Prince, and he said that he's sending another parcel through a private jet. And when it arrived, because he could not send it through illegal ways that the money could be traced, he did not want the world to know, or anybody else to know, that he actually was sending this money to Bashir. So that's why he could not send it through a bank, or he could not send it through ways that were legal. So he decided to put the money on a private jet and fly it right to Bashir's doorstep. So that is how he got to have all this money. He was explaining why he was having all this money and in different, foreign currencies in his home. And this, of course, amounts to money laundering. Yes, that amounts to money laundering. So he admitted to receiving funds actually from the Saudi royals, and he explained how that money got to him all the way from Sudan. So the Saudi royal put the money on a private jet, and it was brought to him in Khartoum. So, of course, the trial still continues. And he was charged, with corruption there and acquisition and use of foreign funds. So we're waiting for the sentencing of that. Bashir, of course, is 75 years old right now, quite frail. And when you look at him, when you look at the images, he is being tried behind a cage, sort of like that one that tried the former Egyptian president that also died like 2 months ago. He's being tried behind a cage. I don't understand that concept. Where did this come from? Why is it? I've not seen that here in Kenya or anywhere across the world. People are just tried in an open court session. Nothing more there. But I see al-Bashir is behind the cage. We saw the former president behind the cage when he was being tried in Egypt, the late president. And so it's an interesting concept that is, I don't know, I've just seen it. Now this is the second time I'm seeing it, and it's interesting that it's almost former heads of state that are being tried. I don't know what will be the logic behind this. They're protecting him from what? From what? I don't understand. Or the cage thing. And when it comes to trying of the former heads of state here in Africa, this is the second time you're seeing that, the former late president of Egypt, and now President Bashir, whose trial was ongoing, and of course he was charged with corruption and illegal acquisition of foreign currencies, and is being tried behind the cage. The concept is quite new, and I don't know what that means. I would love to know. I'm curious to know what reason is that, and is that how cases in Sudan are done? I'm not sure. You can tell me if you're out there. Maybe that's how all judicial sessions takes place. Maybe all the accused, that is where they are kept, that is where they take their plea, that is where they listen to their case as it proceeds in court. I'm not sure, but I'd like to understand the cage concept there when trying, especially the former heads of state here in Africa. So Antonio Guterres, of course, has promised that peacekeepers will continue to support the Congolese army against armed forces groups. Sunday, he arrived in Beni in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, Beni is the place that was hard hit by, the scourge of Ebola, and also it has witnessed a lot of massacres happening, especially in 2014, where hundreds of civilians flee Beni, but also hundreds of them, thousands fled, but also hundreds of them were killed since the start of the war in 2014. And we've seen a renewed sort of a civil war. I mean, just pieces and dots of it, but if that is left to get out of control, then that is a real threat to a start of another civil war there in Congo. So the UN Secretary General promised that the United Nations, of course, peacekeepers would continue to support the Congolese army against such insurgents. And the killings in 2014 were largely attributed by the authorities to the Ugandan militia of the Allied Democratic Forces. I wish the doctor was here. Probably he would have shed some light in that. So we go to Somalia, where the administration of the Somali region of Jubaland, which is one of the country's richest areas, with the lucrative port of Kismayo as its capital, has condemned what it called the abduction of its security minister by the National Somali Authority. So, so the Jubaland is one. There's Jubaland and then there's Somaliland. They are all autonomous regions, but it is still a part of Somalia. And Jubaland has its own currency. Jubaland has its own military. Jubaland has its own administrative structures, like completely autonomous. So now one of its security ministers, was abducted by the National Somali authorities when he, I think, landed at the Mogadishu airport on Saturday. So police in the capital, Mogadishu, has confirmed that the minister, Abdi Rashid Janan, was arrested for what they described as serious crimes upon arrival at Mogadishu airport on Saturday. I've not really gotten into the details of that. I did not see what the serious crimes amounted to, but they're saying that is what they arrested him for on Saturday. And of course, correspondents say the UN-backed government is trying to exercise greater control over the regional states. And last month, of course, it refused to recognize the re-election of Ahmed Mohamed Islam. And he's famously known as Madobe, and who is now the re-elected president of Jubaland. And the dispute has been exacerbated in recent months as rival Gulf states and neighboring nations have also taken sides. So this has, and I think we were talking about Somalia, I think last Thursday, and how, of course, Jubaland is one of the richest areas in Somali, so you would understand why the Somali national government would have keen interest in Jubaland. It's hosting the port of Kismayo, for heaven's sakes. That is a very important port in Somalia, and so you would understand why they're. But I think that being that Jubaland is autonomous, maybe Somali national government together with Jubaland should devise ways to do some of these things amicably, because when you see such a thing, this is very passive aggressive. This is aggression when you are, because according to Jubaland, their minister was abducted, but Somali national government said they arrested this, the regional security minister for the national Somali, of course, the security minister for Jubaland was arrested by, of course, the national security authorities. Like, you don't do that. There are better ways of coexisting, and even if this minister had done something that was illegal or for whatever they're saying serious crimes, I think they should have communicated to the leadership of Jubaland, and then maybe through that the arrest should have been made. So they waited for this minister to land at Mogadishu airport on Saturday, and they arrested him. And of course, Madobe's government has not been very happy with that. And what is really interesting here, that this dispute between these two regions actually is being escalated not by other external forces. And I also was surprised to learn that Ethiopia also has a lot of interest in Jubaland and what it stands to gain, and that's why Ethiopian Prime Minister has really been very close with the president of Somalia, and also they've been very friendly with was it Djibouti and Eritrea at the same time. So, because they're all not for, they're not in support of Jubaland per se. So we see that, and I think also that will go ahead to explain why there's been some passive aggression when it comes to between Somalia and Kenya, because Kenya seems to be warm when it comes to the Jubaland leadership. They seems to be getting along just fine, and that, of course, the president of Somalia is not loving very much. So there seems to be, the momentum, and Jubaland has been gaining a lot of, headlines recently, and I think this must have made the president of Somalia very, very uncomfortable. And so I think this is just a way of just putting his foot down and trying to show who is boss when it comes to this country. So perhaps he's just trying to send a message to Madobe that, make no mistake, I'm still the president of Somalia. And last month, Somali simply refused to recognize the re-election of Ahmed Mohamed Islam, and that is Madobe. And let's just see, we have allowed the foreign powers to come in Africa and try to influence us in some of the ways we make decisions. And what we forget when it comes to some of these proxy wars is that these foreign powers are actually here to serve their own interests. Nobody will ever come to your country from another country and try to do whatever it is that they want to do unless they are going to benefit from it. So when we see these Gulf countries also being sucked into this, acrimonious relationship between Jubaland, is because, and Somalia, or Somaliland and Somalia, is because they have a lot to gain when they do this, and they're looking after their own interests. They're looking after the interests of their own people, and the locals and governments, especially these countries that are targets, unfortunately, they don't get to see the bigger picture and the interest. They don't realize actually whatever the support that might be coming from the outside world, it might not be the best when it comes to advancing the interests of their own country, because these foreign forces come with their own vested interest in this country and they stand to gain. So they play you like ping pong, and then when they serve whatever it is, or they've gotten whatever it is they want from their country, from these countries, and then they'll be off to the next. And before you realize it, you would have lost. So, of course, Port Kismayo is the capital, of Jubaland. So the president of Somalia wants to make sure he still has a control over that. So they arrested one of the ministers from Jubaland at the airport, and I think that is a very passive-aggressive move there by Somali government. So they should find amicable ways, because such things at some point it will just it will be a full-blown something else that we are tired of witnessing here in Africa. And I believe right now, Somalia's president has still a lot to do and to take care of in Somalia itself. And I wish they would just work on, that would be the priority right now, to stabilize Somalia. And then now see how he works his relationships, especially with Jubaland and also Somaliland. Of course, we know we are in September, so the case against Kenya, or the maritime case and the border dispute at the International Court of Justice should be there in a week or so. So let's just see how that will work out for Kenya. And I don't know how that will work in terms of the unity of this region of Africa, and when the decision has been made by the court, what would that mean to Kenya and Somalia, and where will the relationship between these countries stand, and even in the future, which direction will this take us? So let's just wait for that case that is yet in just a few days. We'll start at the International Court of Justice. And what else here would I like us to talk about before I just take a very short break? We see here a leader of the Zambia's opposition denying defaming charges in court last Friday after being arrested for a video in which he allegedly refers to President Edgar Lungu as a dog. Now, Chishimbwe Kambwili is the head of the National Democratic Congress. He was arrested last Wednesday for diffusing a video in which he said some dogs from Chawana do not get tired of traveling. While he was saying this, why it was referred to as a hate speech towards the president is because the President Edgar Lungu had traveled out of the country. Of course, as a president, he has to travel out of the country for official presidential duties. And I think at this point, the president had traveled to the TCAD conference in Japan. And so Chishimbwe Kambwili, the leader of the National Democratic Congress, said, "We see some dogs don't get tired of traveling." So it is seen, because President Edgar Lungu had traveled out of the country for the conference, that he was referring to the president. And so he said some dogs from Chawana do not get tired of traveling. So why it was perceived that he was referring to the president is because Chawana is a slum in Zambia's capital, Lusaka, where President Lungu lived and served as a member of parliament before taking over the presidency in 2015. I think whatever it is, that we should have some respect to even if you don't have respect to the person who is the president, but at least to the office of the presidency of any head of state, of any state here in Africa and across the world. So of course he was arrested, and I think the charges will be preferred to him, and I think that case will be proceeding in the courts there in Zambia, and we will keep you up to date with what is happening there. Just something else before I take a break, and I think maybe two more things. Botswana's president, Mokgweetsi Masisi, has ordered a general election on October 23rd, that is next month, as tensions rise with his estranged predecessor, Ian Khama, the man who put him on the job. If you've been following the politics from Botswana, then you'll understand the acrimonious relationship between, President Mokgweetsi Masisi and the former president Ian Khama. Ian Khama handpicked Mokgweetsi Masisi to be his successor, and after Masisi came to be the president of Botswana, he did not dance very much to the tune of Ian Khama, and so the former president is not very happy with Masisi and how he's running, the Republic of Botswana. So they've been having a very acrimonious relationship. These are people who are very close allies. In fact, Masisi worked as, I think the vice president and also minister in the government of Ian Khama for quite a while. And so when Ian Khama preferred him to be the candidate, as a flag bearer of that party and to run for the presidency, he knew he put one of his stooges there who would be dancing to his tune and who would be taking orders. But after Masisi ascended to power, he became the president, he decided, you know what, I'm going to be my own man, make my own decisions, create my own cabinet, bring my own people on board, and see how I run this country. So Mr. Ian Khama has not been very happy at all, and he's saying that Mr. Masisi is becoming an autocrat, and he's threatening the country's reputation as a beacon of stability in a troubled continent, because Mr. Masisi has been very vocal, even speaking against countries like the United Kingdom, which Mr. Ian Khama has very close ties. Actually, he was I think bred in Britain, so he's very English by excellence. So Mr. Masisi has been criticizing even moves by the United States, moves by United Kingdom, and anything else across the world. He's been very vocal in giving his opinion, which has angered Mr. Khama. Now he's saying Masisi is threatening the country's reputation as a beacon of stability in a troubled continent. So Masisi has called for the holding of the 2019 general election. And it's just a few months ago that Mr. Ian Khama even, moved parties. He stopped being a member of the ruling party now, and he went to the opposition, and he's now supporting the opposition candidate. So he'll not be supporting his protege, as I would love to refer to him, Mr. Mokgweetsi Masisi. So that is another election that will be happening in Africa, and we'll bring you up to date with, of course, everything else that will be revolving around this election in Botswana that now the President declared should happen on October 23. And of course, the National Election Commission made that announcement on Friday, and so it is scheduled, and there will be posts to be filled. That will be 57 National Assembly vacancies and around 490 local government vacancies to be filled there in the general election of Botswana that is slated to be done on October 23rd. And I'll be here together with Dr. Matsanga, who is away for some duties and busy somewhere, but don't worry, I'm here, and hopefully, I'm of help this morning in terms of bringing you up to date in what is happening across Africa. And if there's something I've missed out, please kindly, you're free to share with me here, and I'll read for the rest of us who are watching, the rest of our viewers. And thank you so much, our viewers. I can see a number of you here. Wilson Jichingo, you're saying, good morning to the management of Punchline Africa. Things are getting worse in Ambazonia. Yes, indeed. And I was just going to Ambazonia after that very interesting political intricacies there in Botswana. And what is happening in Ambazonia is that the lawyers in Cameroon are set to go on a 5-day, especially allied to the Ambazonians, are set to go on a 5-day strike to protest against what they describe as difficulties they endure by them in the exercise of their duties. And so the strike will run from the 16th to 20th September. And the lawyers also said that the communique was released by the Bar Council President Chakonte Party and 12 others, and the lawyers say they will have consistently been denied access to the clients and persons in the various detention centers. When you are in detention center, at least your lawyer is allowed by the law anywhere in the world to have access to you, because he's the one who will be representing you against whatever it is charges that have been leveled against you. So if your lawyer is being denied access to you as a person who is facing these charges, this goes against any normal protocol across the world. And so they're saying that is one of the reasons why they want to go on the strike that is slated for 16th to 20th, because they're denied access to their clients and persons in the various detention centers. And also the lawyers also cited several rights violations by judicial authorities as trial in a language not understood by the accused. So that is why I said these are people, especially from the Ambazonia region, because you speak English. Ambazonians don't understand French at all. Maybe a few of them, but because it's predominantly an English, an Anglophone region, not a Francophone region. Remember, Cameroon is divided into two. French colonized the Francophone part. Britain was responsible for the Anglophone part. And so Anglophones, which Ambazonians, speak English. So what the lawyers here are saying, and I think this is something that we've talked about here in plenty of times, it goes without count. The difficulties even Ambazonians faced. Remember the other day, the leaders received a life sentence and they were being tried in Yaoundé. These are Ambazonians. They don't speak French at all. So they had to get like French lawyers from France to come represent them in the Yaoundé courts. And what really was troubling is that they were being tried at a military court. And military court or a martial court is only supposed to try the military, the armed uniformed people, not as civilians. Civilians, you should be taken to a high court, you should be taken to some court somewhere, but not in a martial court. So that goes against any, so a lot of is happening in Cameroon that I think the world should start really paying attention to. So you see here, one of the reasons why the lawyers in Cameroon, they're citing as the reasons why they're going to have this strike, is because they're saying when the people from Ambazonia, when they go to this Yaoundé courts, when they're extradited to this courts, they are tried with language that they cannot understand. You are from the Anglophone, but you're going to be tried, and the official language there in the court is French. Like, seriously, what kind of justice is that? What kind of justice is that? Is that even justice at all? Even from the basic, because I believe in any trial, in any legal matter or anything else in the world, but mostly in legal matters, if you must make sure that the accused person or the parties to that case, at least they get to understand the language, period. So you're being tried in a language you don't even understand. So that is just one of the things that has made the lawyers there want to go out there. And the lawyers also cited several rights violations by judicial authorities and extraction of confessional statements from accused persons through the use of torture and inducements. So apparently, even if you give your statement, part of it, they will make sure it does not show as part of the evidence in court. And also the lawyer said the action is induced by the illegal and prolonged detention of accused persons amongst several other issues listed. Now, this last point, if you can remember, earlier last month, there were two protests in prisons in, I think, is it Kandengu? I can't remember. Correct my mention of that. I can't remember. But is it Kandengu prison in Yaoundé, and also another prison in Ambazonia? So the prisoners went on strike, and the reason was, apart from the inhumane treatment in the prisons, is because others have been held in prison for over a year and they've never been tried in a court, which goes against any goes against the human rights, and the basic rights of even a person who is being accused. So over a year you've been held in detention without trial. So they went on a protest. So when you see this last point, I think that tags to that. And let me just see here. Henry Comey, you're saying, good morning, Punchline. We appreciate Dr. Matsanga for his fight for Ambazonia. A red carpet awaits you guys on Independence Day. All right. Thank you so much. Dr. Matsanga is not here today, but I will pass that message to him. B.R. Garang, you're saying Miriam, handshake is the only way to fight corruption in the Republic of Kenya, according to President Uhuru Kenyatta and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga. Yes, they've said that is the only way to fight corruption. But also other people have come out to complain because remember, opposition leader, our former Prime Minister Raila Odinga, was like the whistleblower in a lot of these scandals. Remember the NYS? He was like the whistleblower. He's the one who had the boldness to come out and when he has evidence in some of these things. And others are saying actually after the handshake and he joined hand with President Uhuru Kenyatta, he's not been very active in terms of being the whistleblower, calling on protests against corruption, or the war on corruption, or the whistleblowing has not been as much since he joined the president. So I don't know what will be your take on that. Yes, of course, but after the handshake with President Uhuru Kenyatta, and Uhuru Kenyatta declaring, his relentless war against corruption, of course, that did not augur very well with another political class in this country, allied to the other side, and majority of them actually are from the president's camp. So yes, you think you're saying that according to the president and prime minister, the handshake is the only way to fight corruption. I'm not sure it's the only way to fight corruption in Kenya. It could be one of the ways, but I know it is the ways that probably the majority of the country will achieve peace in this country. I think it could be one of the ways that will help to heal the divide that has been, the ethnical tensions that has been in this country, especially every 5 years during our electoral year. It's never easy for some Kenyans living in some parts of this country. So this handshake could help look at some of matters like that and could help in cohesion in the country. Maybe other communities or parties will not look at it like that, but it has sort of helped in that regard, that the acrimony that existed within some communities is not there as much. So in that regard, yes, that is working. So we're just waiting for the BBI because the report is coming out next month. So we'll just see what the Building of Bridges initiative has been able to collect from Kenyans across, Kenya, and see what could be some of their, proposals. And I was seeing in one of the dailies this morning, and they're saying the Punguza Mzigo initiative is there to curtail the efforts put forward by the president and the prime minister in the BBI and the investment they've made in that in terms of trying to reconcile Kenyans and solve some of our perennial hatred against each other, which I think is very crazy. Because if something happens to me in my house, I think before I'm able to call my mom or dad or my brother somewhere, the first person who will be quick to come to my place and come to my rescue, assuming my house is on fire today, God forbid, will be my neighbor. It does not matter whether they are whatever tribe they will be the first person, or if I get an accident somewhere, it's the first people on the scene who will come and maybe rush me to the hospital, call an ambulance, call a police, something. And I don't think they will care what my tribe is. They'll just be there to help as human beings. So this tribal thing in Kenya, I think it's just so crazy. I do not understand. And for a person like me who was born and bred in Nairobi, my best friend is not even my tribe. I'll tell you that much. And my very close friends are not even my tribe. I'll tell you that much. So I find it very... I don't know. I just don't get it. But unfortunately, that is how we function in this country, and a lot of Kenyans, and not just Kenyans, even Africa, I think ethnicity plays a very huge role in terms of even the leaders we elect. And we find ourselves in this mess. We find ourselves here today as Africa because we just look at, this is my person, we speak the same language, we come from the same clan, or we are the same in this way, which I think is very counterproductive when it comes to the bigger picture of cohesion in a country and development in a country. And so let's see, this handshake between the Prime Minister, and now I think we're just counting days before we get the report from the BBI that apparently will be having some suggestions on how we can actually unite as Kenyans and the root causes to this madness that makes us kill each other every 5 years, which I think is just outrageous. But we will perhaps the BBI will have some solutions to that, suggestions from across Kenya. So I would just like to take a very short break. John Clark, thank you for joining. And you're saying even thereafter he went to partying with the corrupt cause. Oh, the president. John Clark, I think you just joined. Did you listen to the first part of the show? This is the Standard newspaper this morning. John Clark. And it is saying Uhuru in a new airport drama over Ruto ally. So apparently DP Ruto was at the airport together with the Nandi governor and other, of course, security protocol of the presidential security protocol to receive the president from his ticketed conference attendance in Japan. So when he arrived in the country on Thursday, DP Ruto apparently or allegedly, according to the Standard, decided to tag along Nandi governor. So when Uhuru Kenyatta was greeting the people who were there to receive him, Nandi governor was the last one online, and after the president, he did not expect him to be there, so he was thrown off guard. It just caught him off guard. So after he greeted him, the president quickly rushed to his he did not even speak to the deputy president after that. He just rushed to his presidential limousine off to State House. And so after that, he made, I think there was an order from his camp that all the photos that were taken of him being received and being seen with other people should be deleted. So I don't know if that is what you mean, but apparently that is what happened at the airport on Thursday, according to the Standard. And so let's see how that will work. So you're saying he went partying with who? Please, I need this information when I come back so that I can also know what's really happening and share it with the rest of everybody else. So good morning, Africa. We'll be right back. Please don't go too far.
Viewers, those listening to this tape or this video, I want to bring to your attention that the politics of proxy wars in Africa is becoming real, and it has become a reality. I want to bring to this the attention of the African states that time and time again we have fallen victims of proxy wars. We fight wars that are not ours. We fall in conflicts that are not supposed to be, don't help Africa, and they don't help our countries at all. The proxy war that is in East and Central and the Horn of Africa has been ignited supported, equipped by France. It has been very real that the French government quietly, through its company called Total Oil, has been searching for resources around the triangle of East and Central Africa and the Great Lakes region and the Horn of Africa. The LAPSET was one of them, which could have been a landmark project for the people of France. They withdrew from it. The Tanga to Mwanza, they made it, they withdrew from it. The search for oil and resources through Total Oil has brought us the dangers of a proxy war in the region. It is therefore very prudent for people of the region to understand the dynamics that we are going through. For example, in Rwanda and the Burundi conflict, there is a proxy war. We are fighting a proxy country. It has brought us to a war between the two countries, between Uganda and Rwanda and Burundi. There is a proxy war in Congo who is sponsoring a resurgence of rebels that are fighting President Tshisekedi because he was not supported by countries that we know very well. This type of strategy has happened in North Africa, where Libya has been reduced to rebels, where each faction, even the government supported by United Nations, is being bombarded by a rebel called Khalifa Haftar, who is funded by countries that we know. The question of Somalia and the Kenyan maritime presents a challenge, a test case for Africa and East Africa to stand firm and denounce the actions of countries that bring proxy wars and proxy politics in our region. It is therefore my humble submission that for this conflict, for this to end, we must do enough publicity, advocacy around the area to tell and explain to the international community why this problem is going to create an imbalance in the peace in the region, and the regional peace will be affected. It is therefore my humble submission that as a Ugandan whose troops, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers of other many millions Ugandans who are in Somalia, condemn any action by the Somali government to try to resolve issues that should have been resolved amicably as Africans within the African confines. I submit, therefore, that some of us will go a mile further to do now, from now onwards, to expose, to show the challenges of these countries that make us fight a proxy war in Africa. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.
Welcome back. This is Good Morning Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu, and today Dr. Matsanga is not present here, but of course, thank you so much for those who are keeping you company today. And he's somewhere busy taking care of some things, but he'll be back with us very, very soon, and he will join us. So now, the few minutes we've been talking about what has been happening. I started with Kenya, and I said the Daily Nation, we look at it after I was through with the, looking at some news making headlines in Africa, and we look at Zambia, we looked at Botswana, we've also looked at what is happening, the latest from Cameroon, we've also looked at Somalia and the problem, but that now Somalia really wants to exert its powers there in Jubaland, and also we looked at Sudan, and the latest, of course, we learned that former President Omar al-Bashir was on Saturday charged with corruption, with illegal and also illegal acquisition of foreign currencies. And also we looked at, did we look at Nigeria really? And now the anti-corruption body now has identified the people who were mentioned, who were on the list of the FBI, the fraudsters. and the Nigerian Anti-Corruption Commission there. It's called the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. On Friday, announced the arrest of a top internet fraudsters. Remember, Nigerians have not been having such a good, standing when it comes to the fraudsters that they're seen. And on that list, the FBI list, a majority of them, nearly all of them, are from Nigeria. And so it appears as though the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, that is the body tasked with fighting corruption and economic crimes in Nigeria, is working hand in hand with the FBI, and it will be assisting the FBI in identifying and even making arrests of some of these people. On Friday, he named one of the persons there, and his name is Oyediran Joseph, and they actually arrested this person. So that is good partnership between the Nigerian, the Economic Financial Crimes Commission, and the FBI. What else did we talk about? We talked about Libya and how some of the 3 members of the United Nations Security Council actually are, the permanent members. There are 5 permanent members, and out of the 5 permanent members, 3 of them are actually in support of General Haftar and against a UN-backed government, a UN-backed leader in Libya. I do not understand how that works, but please help me understand that. That I can't even explain to you. 3 members out of the 5 of the United Nations Security Council are supporting somebody that the United Nations have recognized as the leader, the legal leader in Libya. How that makes sense, I don't know. Please help me understand. John Clark, you saying Raila Odinga has been seen with those before handshake. Here, Raila had accused of being corrupt. Yes, indeed. Can you please drop some names here, John Clark? Please make it easy for me today. All right. Thank you. So yes, so that is just some news I was looking at here in Africa. Let me just know your thoughts about some of that. So now, on matters corruption in the judiciary. Now here, the judiciary has now found itself in a quagmire this morning and problems. This according to the Daily Nation on page 4. And it says the headlines there, how the judiciary lack of tribunal sank Kenya into a 283 billion Kenya shillings tax hole. That's a lot of money, especially in terms of, when it comes to the Kenyan economy. So let me just read some lines there so that it makes us understand what the Daily Nation is saying. So the Kenya Revenue Authority has been unable to collect 283 billion Kenya shillings it had demanded from big taxpayers thanks to a slow-paced judiciary and failure by the National Treasury to put in place a tax tribunal to resolve the dispute. Now, the National Treasury under Cabinet Secretary Henry Rotich failed to constitute the Tax Appeals Tribunal for a year after the expiry of the previous team's term in office, leaving the taxman at the mercy of defaulters who parked cases at a non-existent tribunal. Now, for the past 14 months, businesses and individuals aggrieved by KRA tax and demands were all too happy to file appeals to a tribunal they knew had no quorum or was at best moribund, as in it was non-existent. And so, meanwhile, the disputed taxes could not be collected and KRA could do nothing about it. Defaulters took advantage of this vacuum to lodge cases of the Tax Appeals Tribunal, and we could only wait, says the KRA Commission General James Mburu, who took over the reins of KRA in June, I think this year. And Mr. Rotich was dropped from cabinet in the wake of Kimorel and Roll Dam scandals, only gazetted members of the Independent Tribunal in April 2019, some 12 months after the previous team exited, leaving only the chairman in office. All right, now that does not even make sense, especially in such a very sensitive docket. By last month, the tribunal had not met 2 months after Judiciary Chief Registrar Anne Amadi swore them in. As appeals continued to pile up, by last week, 803 appeals had been lodged. Now, the tribunal consisted of a chairperson and at least 15 no more, and I just want to see where the judiciary now is coming in. So, after the new members were sworn in, 2 months after they were sworn in by the registrar of the Judiciary Chief Registrar Anne Amadi swore them in, they had not had convened even a meeting for 2 months after they had been sworn in as the members of this tribunal. See? And in a total, Mr. Rotich appointed 19 members whose first term ended in April. Although there was room for reappointing them, the then CS did not, rendering the tribunal moribund. This significantly hurt tax collectors, and it continues there to talk about now. Of course, following a national outcry, the judiciary was a stumbling block in both the war against corruption and in the collection of government's revenue. The Commissioner General says they have recently seen some positive changes. So after there was an outcry, and Dr. Matsanga has been on the front lines, about what is terms the inept judiciary in this country, and the manner in which they carry out, some of these cases that are very important to Kenyans, and the slow pace in which these cases, they drag forever in the Kenyan courts. So after a few months of the outcry, even the president himself, I think, pointed at the judiciary in one of the corruption workshops at the Bomas of Kenya earlier this year. They said, you know what, judiciary, you are a problem, and you are greatly contributing to the increased corruption, because people are brought to court, and then you let them go very easily, they're given lower amounts when it comes to bail conditions, and the bail conditions are very lenient, and so people get away, and then these cases drag forever in the Kenyan courts. So Mr. Mburu now, the KRA commissioner, is saying that after following a national outcry about the judiciary and the slow pace in which it's handling these cases, now there has seemed to be some improvement in the manner in which the cases take the time it takes to solve some of these cases, and that the public, together with Dr. Matsanga here, has been very vocal against what it terms as the slow pace. The judiciary actually takes care of some of these cases. So another notable case was of lawyer Tom Ojenda, who had a running battle with KRA in court, and of course, on November 2nd, High Court Judge Chacha Mwita prohibited the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and KRA. So the KRA is just giving examples and ways they actually want to meet their target in terms of collecting the revenue for this country, but ways in which the judiciary is actually standing against their efforts, because people run to court to bar KRA from arresting them, or to bar orders from being served to them. And so there you go, another case there that KRA is pointing out of Tom Ojenda, who had a running battle with KRA in court over 443 million tax bill. On November 2nd, High Court Judge Chacha Mwita prohibited the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and KRA from starting civil or criminal proceedings against Professor Ojenda in respect to the tax issue. So that is it. So judiciary, that is how it has been working. This is according to KRA, to help the KRA not collect. And now they're saying they've lost about 283 billion in such cases where individuals who are targeted by the Kenya Revenue Authority, for them, they've not been tax compliant. They'll run to the court, and the court will give orders that will shield them, that will protect them from not being arrested or not being answerable or accountable for their non-tax compliance. So just at a glance there, the same courts applying new strategy in tax cases, and it continues to say the courts are now applying to the doctrine of exhaustion of remedies and referring the aggrieved parties to the tax tribunal. They have of late been demanding security of taxes, which was unheard of previously. So this is just some of the hurdles that the taxman is finding when he goes to the court. But the main problem is that the tax tribunal has yet to have a sitting and leaving the tax collector with no recourse. So when these cases are taken to the court refers them to the tax tribunal. And I was reading there earlier, the tax tribunal has, as it was constituted, they took an oath of office 2 months ago. They've not even had they've not convened their first meeting, and it has not been active for a period of time. So when the court refers these tax matters to the tax tribunal, and in the Ministry of Treasury, there's no the tribunal is not properly constituted. It lacks quorum. So the cases, there's just a backlog of cases upon cases of tax cases. So there is how the taxman is feeling. The judiciary is actually shortchanging them in the war, in them wanting to achieve, and in the war against corruption and tax defaulters. So they're saying, okay, that is very. Let me just continue reading there. So among the demands is 17 Kenya shillings 17 billion tax bill from the Zakem Construction Company, the contractor of Kenya's controversial new 48 billion pipeline. Yes, there you go. So KRA is taking issue with the manner the judiciary of Kenya is handling the matters of tax evaders brought to the courts, and referring them to a tribunal that is not even does not have quorum, is not constituted properly, and has been inactive for quite a number now. So, and that now leaves KRA. They can't pursue further because they can't, they have to work within the law, even when they're collecting these taxes. I think now this comes at a backdrop earlier of, you remember, the dramatic arrest of Keroche CEO Tabitha Karanja, together with her husband, and other bigwigs that the KRA has been trying to reach out and target. And something else here I see, part of the front page of the Daily Nation this afternoon, a Sonko date with anti-graft team over garbage tenders. No, this one I have to read now. I want to know what's happening. I reside in this city, so let me see what my governor is up to. And they're saying Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko is expected to appear before anti-graft agency detectives tomorrow, to record a statement on the award of tenders for garbage collection and disposal in the country. Now, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC, is investigating claims of corruption in the award of tenders for the 2017-2018 and 2018-2019 financial years. And the EACC Director in charge of investigations, Dr. Mr. Abdi Mohamud, had written to the governor requiring him to appear before investigators on Friday last week, but Mr. Sonko said he was unavailable and offered to appear tomorrow. So let's just wait. And I would like to give Tuesday, September 3rd as the day I will be available. So he will be appearing at the EACC to answer to those allegations. And tomorrow, of course, I will be here and I will let you know. I'll bring you up to speed to what is happening there from the Nairobi County. And that marks the end of our show today. Of course, as I said earlier, Dr. Matsanga is not in today, but he will be joining us later. And just before I leave here, I see just still on the front page of the Daily Nation, Western Hotel land linked to another case of grabbing, and Deputy President associate who once claimed ownership of hotel used the same IR number to bid to irregularly acquire prime land in Westlands. If you want to know more about the story, go to Daily Nation, page 6, and you'll get the details of that. It appears scandals never seems to go away from, the Deputy President, but there it is there at the front page of the Daily Nation. This, of course, has been Good Morning Africa. My name is Miriam Gutu, and I want to thank you so much for your patronage this morning, for your company, and also for engaging with me this morning. I appreciate you very much, and we can meet here for our next broadcast. Bol Nyang, you're saying you're watching from Australia. Thank you. And Bismarck Bura, you're saying hi, punchline, hi to you, and thank you so much for joining. Let's meet you again for another edition of Good Morning Africa tomorrow. But for now, my name is Miriam Goto, and it is bye-bye.